Welcome to The Explainer. Ever wonder how a sacred text from over 1400 years ago can lay out a blueprint for a just society? Well, today we're digging into the sixth part of the Qur'an, and we're using the summary Khulasatul Qur'an to help us unpack its core teachings on everything from faith and contracts to law and justice.
So, what's this all about, really? It kind of boils down to one big question. What are the key principles that should guide a believer's entire life, from what they believe in their heart to how they interact with people every day? It's about building a complete framework, and it all has to start with faith. Okay, so where do we begin? It all starts with the most important thing, right? The foundation. And that is getting crystal clear on your faith. This section really zeroes in on understanding the nature of God and the exact role of His prophets.
Now this is really interesting. The text gets very specific about the position of Jesus. It holds him in super high regard, as a messenger and a word from God, but it also draws a very clear line. It directly takes on the concept of the Trinity, telling people, hey, stop saying three. Allah is just one God.
And this leads to another core belief in Islam, this one about Jesus' final moments on earth. The text says he wasn't actually crucified, but that it was only made to look that way. The belief is that God raised Jesus up to himself. And this, of course, is a major departure from the Christian narrative.
All right, so once that foundation of belief is set, where do we go? Well, the teachings move from the inside, what you believe, to the outside, how you actually build a just society. These ideas aren't just abstract. They're meant to be put into practice, starting with the promises we make.
You know, one thing that's hammered home here is how absolutely sacred a promise is. The command to fulfill all contracts is a big deal. It covers everything, from a business deal to a promise you make to a friend, all the way up to the covenant a person has with God. That's literally the glue that holds a community together. Okay, now take a look at these pillars of justice. They lay out a standard that is, wow, it's incredibly high. I mean, look at step 3 in particular, being just even towards people you hate. This frames justice not as something you do when you feel like it, but as an absolute duty, something that actually brings you closer to God. So, we've talked about these big, lofty ideas like justice. Now the guidance gets super practical, right down to something we all do every single day: eat.
All right, so here's a list of what's off the menu, so to speak. These rules create a very distinct practice for believers. And it's not just about what you can eat, like pork, but also about the how, the way an animal dies. The focus on avoiding animals that died on their own or weren't killed properly really highlights a principle of eating food that's pure and prepared with intention. Okay, so if you're going to maintain that social order we talked about, you also have to deal with crime, right? You have to protect people. So the text also outlines some very specific legal punishments for serious crimes that could really destabilize a community.
This table is pretty fascinating. It lays out a kind of sliding scale for the crime of highway robbery, which was a huge threat back then. You can see how the punishment gets more severe depending on exactly what happened, from exile just for spreading terror, all the way up to execution for someone who robbed and murdered. It's a system designed to be a very strong deterrent.
And it's a similar idea for theft. Another very specific and, yes, very severe punishment is laid out. The text explains this not just as a penalty for the crime itself, but as a powerful message to the rest of society, meant to protect everyone's property and security. All right, let's get to what you could call the climax of this whole section's message. It's a huge, pivotal declaration about the very nature of the faith itself, kind of presented as the final word on the matter.
So, after laying out all these laws for belief, for society, and for justice, what does it all mean? What's the final verdict on this guidance? This question leads us right to what many scholars say is one of the most significant verses in the entire Qur'an. And here it is. This is that powerful final declaration. The source material explains this verse as the moment the divine guidance is sealed. Perfected and completed. The idea is that from this point forward, nothing needs to be added to or taken away from the core of the faith. So with this complete guidance, what does the ideal believer actually look like? This slide kind of paints a portrait of their character. And it's not just a checklist of rules, is it? It describes a person who has a mutual love with God, who is humble with their own community, strong in their beliefs, and just keeps striving on their path without worrying about what critics have to say.
And that really leaves us with one last thing to think about. We've just walked through these principles of justice, integrity, and faith that are over a millennium old. So the real challenge for us, right here and now, is to ask, how can these foundational ideas about building a better world actually inform our own efforts today?
This explainer was put together by the Ummah 360 team, and it's based on the book
Khulasat ul-Quran by Maulana Muhammad Ilyas Gaman. If you want to find more resources like this, just search for Ummah 360 on the Play Store and the App Store. Thanks so much for watching.